What's going on, everybody? My name is Trey Divorce, and it's the Infinity World Show. I hope everybody out there is feeling good and feeling blessed. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling blessed, but y'all gonna have to bear with me for a little bit. I'm really, really sick today. I've been sick for a couple of days, man. My chest been hurting. I got a stuffy nose. I feel like something been stuck in my throat. Like I got a nasty cough. You feel me? Pause on the throat. But I got a nasty cough. You feel me? So y'all just gonna have to bear with me for a little bit. But like I said, we're gonna have a great episode, a very, very great episode. Shout out to Julian Johnson's Law. He like the Black History Encyclopedia. You feel me? He know everything about Black history. You feel me? He know everything, even some details he'll break, some details he'll talk about. And I'm thinking in my head, like, bro, how he even know that? Do he got a time machine or something? It's like sometimes it's like he talk like he was there. You feel me? So shout out to Julian Johnson's Law, man. We are going over the life and lynching of Allan Green, being successful in the Jim Crow South. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Of two injustices. Two injustices that Jim Crow orchestrated against one black man until it got the result that it wanted. This is a story about how black success can lead to violence and terror. Not because the black person did anything wrong, but because black success was a crime punishable by death. The black man I'm going to tell you about suffered greatly under the weight of oppression until it finally crushed him. This is an important story that we must tell. Black resistance to racial oppression often resulted in lynching. The caste system that Jim Crow created required that black people always be on the bottom rail of society. Success for a black person was seen as an insult to the racial order of the day. Confidence and competence in a black person would often lead to a violent encounter with whites. There was no safe harbor for black people in the Jim Crow South. Staying to yourself and working hard was not a guarantee of safety. In fact, it would often lead you on a collision course to a lynching. Many black people were lynched because they were successful and maintained their dignity in the face of white oppressive rule. Lynch mobs loved nothing more than silencing a successful black person. For example, in 1916, a prosperous and prominent black farmer named Anthony Crawford was lynched at Abbeville, South Carolina, after he stood up for himself and refused to sell his cottonseed for less than what it was worth. His punishment was to be arrested, beaten, and dragged through the town and lynched. The town then seized his 400 acres of land and sold it, and forced his family to flee the state. Anthony Crawford is just one of many successful black people.
Hold on, y'all. Hold on. 400 acres? 400 acres? See, we don't need to go back to slavery when we talk about reparations. Go back to the Jim Crow era. Man, 400 acres. And because he was successful and the white people didn't like it, they killed him and just took the land and ran his family out of town? That's crazy. Imagine what that 400 acres would have did for that family today if they would have would have kept passing it down. And y'all want to? Are you serious? That's crazy. 400 acres. They just took.
People who suffered a similar fate. But what happened to Allan Green in 1930 serves as a reminder of how relentless Jim Crow was in targeting successful black people. Jim Crow forces pursued Allan Green for 2 decades until they got what they wanted, which was his life. Allan Green was born around 1878 to Martha and Stephanie Green in Oconee County, South Carolina. His parents were formerly enslaved black people. They lived a good part of their lives enslaved, working for free for white profit. Allan was one of 4 children. Allan could read and write, and around 1909, Allan married a woman named Corey. He settled in Walhalla, South Carolina. That's in the upper Piedmont region of South Carolina. Allan made a good life for himself. He was well liked by the upper white business class and professional community. They saw Allan as an excellent worker who was highly skilled in a lot of areas. Allan worked for the city in the streets and sanitation department, where he was responsible for supervising many white workers. Allan also did work as a firefighter. It's reported that on at least 2 occasions, Allan saved the entire town from being destroyed by fire. Because of all of his success, Allan was able to live a really good life. He was able to buy a truck and livestock and a home in the white area of town where.
Did I hear that? Did I hear that right? Allan saved the town twice from fire. Allan saved the whole town twice. This is Allan says, man, shout out to Allan. He did it. He did it up, man. Shout out to Allan Green, man.
White mill workers lived.
Shout out
But
to the
the
ancestors.
poor whites hated Allan. They said that he was arrogant and that he thought of himself as being just as good as a white man, if not better. The fact that Allan supervised white workers only made them hold to this belief more and hate Allan even more. In February of 1915, 37-year-old Allan Green was accused of a crime that would normally mean a death sentence for a black man during those times. A 26-year-old white woman who worked at the mill accused Allan of attempting to attack her. This woman lived 2 houses down from Allan's mother and knew his family very well. She occasionally helped Allan's mother with washing clothes that she was hired to do. At the time of the alleged attack, she was at Allan's mother's home when she said that Allan attacked. Allan was arrested and given a $1,000 bail and released. The white citizens doubted the story from the very beginning.
Spotter Studio is an AI software built to help YouTubers come up with video
Even
ideas,
did he
titles,
say even
and
though
thumbnails.
did he say the white citizens doubted the story? Hold on.
I've never seen anything like this. For what Allan was accused of, many black people accused of similar crimes during their time would never get bail. Bail was the furthest thing from their mind. Trying not to get seized from the jail and lynched was the only thing on their minds after being arrested. The fact that Allan was granted bail does say a lot about his prosecution and what the law and the authorities thought about it. Before Allan could be tried, the police had to locate the alleged victim. She left town and was found 12 miles away in another town. She was arrested and brought back to Walhalla. Normally, this kind of allegation would have had the local town in a fervor for a racial mob for revenge in the lynching, but that did not happen in this case. The local press reported that there was no excitement over the case and that most were fine to let whatever happened in court play out. This was combined with the fact that many did not believe the alleged victim. In July of 1915, the jury returned a verdict of guilty against Allan, but the jury gave a recommendation of mercy for Allan. Once again, this is not something that you would see in the Jim Crow South. Typically, it was a recommendation of no mercy from a jury for an allegation like this. Allan was sentenced to 13 years of hard labor on the chain gang in Oconee County. Allan should have been left to suffer on the chain gang and endure a miserable life of slave-like conditions, but that's not
Crazy. No evidence, no nothing. All the white woman had to say was like the last video. All the white woman got to say is he touched me, he raped. They just going off the white woman word. They ain't do no investigation, no nothing. Even the town knew she was lying. They still went ahead and like, no, you still guilty. Dude saved the town twice from a fire. Twice. And he couldn't get.
not what happened. Some white citizens doubted the alleged victim's story from the very beginning. They wrote to Governor Robert Cooper on Allan's behalf. Some said that she had a bad reputation for being with both black and white men. Others said that they did not believe that Allan had any involvement with her at all. The prosecutor said as much himself. The prosecutor said that, given the woman's reputation, that Allan's conduct might have been a solicitation and not a crime. Every member of the jury that convicted Allan signed a letter asking for him to be freed and released from prison. In August of 1919, the pardon board recommended that Allan be paroled and released. Governor Cooper granted Allan's parole. Allan ended up serving only 4 years of his 13-year sentence on the chain gang. Before I tell you about the rest of this story, take a look at this draft registration card that Allan completed in 1918. This is Allan's actual handwriting. Notice it says in the section that asks for Allan's home address and his employer's name that Allan wrote that he was on the chain gang. Even though it's only a piece of paper, it's a link to a time when Allan was suffering under the weight of injustice. You can only imagine what he was experiencing on the day that he filled out this card. At the same time that his country wanted him to register for the draft, it was also treating Allan like a slave after unjustly prosecuting him. After Allan was released from prison, he returned to his life. He began to rebuild what he lost. Just like before he went to prison, Allan once again was able to obtain some bit of financial success. And also, just like before, this caused problems for him. Walhalla was a white mill town. It had 2 cotton mills and employed most of the town's white population. But in 1930, the country was in the midst of a Great Depression, and the mills were only running at half of their capacity. This caused financial strain for the white population there. But Allan continued to thrive because he didn't work at the mill. After his release, he went back to working for the city. The fact that Allan had his city job meant that he was taking a job that many believed belonged to a white man. Allan made about $7.50 a day from his city job, and he also had money from his side trucking business. He made considerably more compared to the meager earnings of the poorer whites in that town. Allan's success was an affront to the racial order of the day. Black people were not supposed to be successful. They were supposed to be subservient and in second-class citizenship. And Allan Green was neither. The fact that he lived what poor whites believed to be a good life while they struggled made Allan a target. His success would be his downfall.
Oh, I bet them white folks is hot. I bet them white folks is hot. Seeing them, they going through the Great Depression. Here come Allen, like, nigga, doing it up. I bet them white folks was hot. Forget them. Should have nigga forget them shit.
In 1930, a young lawyer named Robert Ballantyne saw what was going on in the town and the resentment towards Allan Green, and he used it to his advantage. He exploited the racial and economic fears and anxieties of the poor whites in Walhalla. He said that the poor white farmers and mill workers had an enemy that they could blame for all of their problems, and that enemy was Allan Green. Ballantyne was running for mayor of Walhalla, and his campaign promise, if he were elected, was that he would fire Allan Green from his city job. The citizens of that town would no longer have to worry about a Negro stealing and cheating to get ahead at the expense of the white taxpayers. That job would go to a white person, as it was always supposed to. This campaign promise resonated with the poor whites and working class of that town, and it won him a strong following amongst the poor whites who were angry and worked at the mill, and this ended up helping him win the election. Allan did not wait for Ballantyne to fire him. He resigned immediately. That should have been the end of this. Allan should have been allowed to go back to his life, but he wasn't. Jim Crow came knocking at Allan's door again. After losing his city job, this was only the beginning of Allan's problems. On April 20th, 1930, which is Easter Sunday, Jim Crow came looking for Allan.
There is electromagnetic
Wow.
energy in that pyramid.
Wow, man. Dude, so the dude who's running for governor or mayor or whatever, wow, ran a whole
And Bert
campaign.
Ramey and his wife and his sister came to Allan's home. He wanted to rent a mule from Allan to plant his family's crop. At this time, Allan was around 50 years old. He and his wife Corey lived 1 block off Main Street in the town and 3 blocks from the city's business center. This was not a remote place. It was in plain view of everyone around. The Ramey family was familiar with Allan and Corey. Bert's father had rented a mule from Allan before, and Carrie Ramey, Bert's 18-year-old wife, would sometimes visit Allan's wife Corey. Corey would give Mrs. Ramey gifts. Well, on this occasion, Corey Green was not at home when the Rameys stopped by. At the time, Bert and Carrie Ramey had only been married for about 2 months. Bert and Carrie Ramey made up a story that gave those that hated Allan the justification to do what they wanted to him for years. Here's what Bert and Carrie claimed happened on that Easter morning in 1930. Bert said that he arrived at Allan's home with his wife Carrie and his sister. Bert, Carrie, and Allan walked to the back of the home, presumably to discuss renting the mule from Allan. His sister stayed behind at the front of the home. Bert said that Allan told him that he should go to the front and get his sister and bring her to the back of the house where they were. Later, when called to testify about this in court, Bert admitted that the distance from the front to the back of the home when he was away from his wife was the length of the courtroom. He was asked to walk up and down the courtroom to demonstrate just how long he would have been away from his wife. It took Bert 29 seconds to walk up and down the courtroom. Bert claimed that when he returned to the back door, he found it locked and his wife nowhere to be found. After looking around, he said that he went to the kitchen window. When he looked through the window and into the home, he said that he saw his wife strapped to a chair and Allan had just finished violating her. Bert said that he immediately called for his wife to come out of the home. When Allan heard this, Bert said that Allan untied Carrie and released her. Bert said that Allan and his wife then returned to the back porch, where they all talked together for a few minutes. Bert said that
Oh, hold on, I ain't gonna lie, bro. I ain't gonna lie. If I was living back then, nigga, no white woman is allowed in my house. I'm gonna tell my wife, don't you let that white woman in our house. What? That's crazy. I also don't do no bunny hopping. That's crazy. And it's just crazy how they can just make up a story and everybody just run with the story. Like, this is crazy. I'm pretty sure they wanted Mr. Allen's mule, and they was like, know what? We're about to just get this. Just say he raped you. He raped you. And we just gonna get the meal for free. That's crazy. Yo, y'all want to give white women a pass? I know a lot of y'all be want to give white women a pass, and we always talk about white men, white male supremacy, and all of this. But man, white women be right there with them. They be hand to hand, step by step. They don't get no passes from me. Look, all the common denominator in all these stories is a white woman says she got raped by a black man. Lies. Crazy.
He and his wife and his sister then walked back home through the city, not screaming out in shock or anger or saying anything to anyone about what had just happened.
You know what I'm saying? If I see my wife, if I leave and come back and the door's locked and I go check the window and I see my wife chained to a chair and see the dude this violator busting through the window. Busting through, it's all that's crazy.
Nor did they report it to anyone as they walked home. The story that Carrie Ramey told is just as unbelievable. She also later testified in court. She said that when Bert left to get his sister, Allan took her by the hand and threatened her with a razor, and then he pulled her into the kitchen. She said that Allan then bound and covered her mouth, and then Allan strapped her into the chair and he attempted to violate her. She said that afterwards, he took off one of her shoes and he put 2 little red bows on it, and he then gave her a powder puff case and released her. When asked if this attack made her mad, she said that it had not. This incredibly unbelievable story is what ended up ruining one black family's lives and causing pain to the entire black community in Walhalla. Bert said that once he got home, he told his father about what happened. It was Bert's father who reported the alleged attack to Sheriff John Thomas. The sheriff rushed to the Ramey's home to interview Carrie. He asked Carrie if Allan had completed the attack. At first, Carrie said that Allan had not completed it. And then Bert jumped in to correct her and remind her that she had earlier said that Allan had completed the attack. Carrie then changed her mind and said that Allan had completed his attack on her. At 11 p.m. that night, Sheriff Thomas went to Allan's home. With the sheriff was Mayor Robert Ballantyne, the same man that had won the mayoral race by drumming up racial fears around Allan and promising to fire Allan if he was elected. Allan had just returned home from church. The sheriff questioned Allan about the allegations that Carrie Ramey made. Allan denied that he had done anything like that. Allan was arrested by the sheriff right there in his home. Mayor Ballantyne was also a lawyer, and he told Allan that he would need a lawyer to represent him for these charges that were being brought against him, and that he should hire Ballantyne for his case. Allan said that he had his own lawyer. It's not certain what the mayor's intentions were when he suggested that Allan hire him, but what we do know is that Mayor Robert Ballantyne did not like Allan, and he was no friend of his, and it's hard to believe that he would have wanted anything other than to bring harm to Allan Green. Allan was taken to the county jail. After Allan was arrested, many white people did not believe the allegations against him, but the poorer whites were all too eager to latch on to these false allegations. It didn't take much for them to find a reason to hate Allan Green. Over the course of 2 nights, groups of white men met at the Mill Village ballpark to talk about forming the lynching party to lynch Allan Green. On Tuesday, the first night of the meetings, about 70 men attended. The mob had this twisted idea that if at least 100 men participated, then somehow the lynching would be legal. On Wednesday night, a much larger crowd came, and after counting that they had over 100 people, the mob left for the jail. Members of the mob were as young as 15 years old. Someone rushed ahead to warn the sheriff. The jail had 2 levels. The main level was the jail, and the sheriff and his family lived on the second level. Sheriff Thomas and his family were awakened out of their sleep. After being alerted as to what was about to happen, the sheriff grabbed his weapon and he rushed down the stairs to try to stop the mob. But he was no match for this massive mob. Sheriff Thomas told the mob that they could not have Allan and tried to stop them from getting into the jail and seizing Allan. After arguing with the sheriff, someone in the mob clubbed the sheriff in the head and they actually fractured his skull. The sheriff was severely injured and began to bleed out right there on the floor. The other mob members then grabbed the sheriff and demanded that he hand them the keys so they can go in and get Allan. The sheriff's wife and his daughter were also there and they pleaded with the mob to stop hurting the sheriff. Sheriff Thomas's wife gave the mob members the keys to stop them from attacking her husband and possibly taking his life. The mob immediately went looking for Allan. Allan heard the commotion and left his cell, which was unlocked, and he climbed on top of a cage and hid there. He tried to remain as quiet as possible, but he was quickly found. The mob then took Allan, who was barely dressed, and they dragged him out of the jail. Allan begged the white men to let him speak, but they would have none of that. They did not come to speak to Allan or to bargain with him. They came for one thing, and that was to get Allan and to lynch him. They told Allan that they did not want to hear anything he had to say, and that he better make peace with God because it was about to be over for him very soon.
Wow. Wow.
Allan started saying his prayers right there. The mob led a procession of cars and trucks away from the jail. The mob then took Allan 2 miles outside of the city. They had a specific spot in mind for this horrific act. 11 years prior, when Allan was working on the chain gang, the group of prisoners that he was with was camped near a stream when word came of Allan's pardon. He was released from that spot near a tree. The mob tried to find that exact spot where Allan was released, and when they did, they tied Allan to the oak tree. They then lined up cars around Allan with their lights shining on him. Allan said his final prayers, and then the mob fired at him countless times, riddling his body. They fired at Allan hundreds of times. The mob then nailed a sign to the tree that said, "On this spot, Allan Green got his parole, and he got his lynch." Allan's body was left on that tree until the next morning when the coroner finally came and removed him. The tree became a symbolic embrace of Jim Crow and lynch mobs and a rejection of black people and black upward mobility. Hundreds of white pilgrims came to that tree just to see it, with some decorating it with American flags. Others took pieces of the tree's bark as souvenirs as to what had happened that day. Now, while this may seem shocking,
Hold on. What? Um, and y'all scared to live under Trump. What people had to go through? They went and got him out of jail. They beat up the sheriff, damn near killed the sheriff. Went into the jail, grabbed Mr. Allan Green, took him out, drove 2 miles out, found the spot where he got pardoned at. Ooh, these people were some sick, evil people. Just evil. And then hanged him? This is crazy.
it was actually quite common. There are countless accounts of people taking body parts of black victims who were lynched as souvenirs after incidents like this took place. This was a barbarous and medieval form of mass mob entertainment.
That is sick. He said white people took a pilgrimage to this tree a pilgrimage to this tree and took brushes and took souvenirs. That's evil and sick. And mind you, this ain't slavery days. People always want to go back to this. We wasn't there during slavery days and da. We're talking about Jim Crow days. Your grandpa was here in the 50s and 40s and 30s. Your grandpa was here in 50s, 30s and 40s, 20s, all of that. That's crazy. Man, white people some sick people.
For white Southerners. Photos of lynches will be taken and sent out as postcards all across the country, and we can safely assume that it's possible that the same was done to Allan's body after this event. Here's something interesting about this story. Allan's lynching could have been prevented. The mob had planned for 3 days as to what they were going to do and how they planned to get Allan. The plans were so well known around town that a pastor told the sheriff and said that he needed to get Allan out of Walhalla. Policemen at the mill also heard about it and warned the sheriff of the lynch mob's plans. The sheriff would later say that he did not take these warnings seriously because he did not believe that anyone actually believed these allegations against Allan or that Allan was guilty of attacking Mrs. Ramey. The sheriff's actions cost Allan his life and almost cost the sheriff and his family their lives. Allan's lynching sent shockwaves throughout all of South Carolina. It was another reminder that the rule of law would take a backseat to racial mob violence and injustice. Governor John Richards appointed Anderson County Solicitor Leon Harris as special investigator to look into what happened. The governor also sent a team of 12 detectives to Walhalla to help with the investigation. Solicitor Harris and the detectives spoke to countless people around town. Within the first few days of the investigation, they discovered that a night policeman was involved in this entire ordeal. After questioning the night policeman, he confessed to being at the lynching scene. As a result of what they learned from him and the information they gathered from others, they were able to follow up on other leads that led them to making 4 arrests and getting sworn statements from over 40 individuals. A grand jury was also convened to investigate alongside Solicitor Harris. After calling witnesses to testify before the grand jury and assembling all of the evidence, 17 people were indicted for Allan's lynching. They included farmers and textile workers, a blacksmith, the garbage man, gas station operators, an ice plant employee, policemen, and Mayor Robert Ballantyne. All of the defendants pleaded not guilty and were released on $2,500 bond. The mayor was involved in this entire incident. He was present when Allan was arrested, and after Allan was taken into custody, the mayor gave a speech saying that had Mrs. Ramey come from a better white family, Allan would have been lynched at once on the spot. The investigation also revealed that the mayor was present at the ballpark during the mob meetings, and he talked to the mob about how they needed a leader to orchestrate all of this for them. Mob members said that the mayor wanted Allan lynched, and he was the main one talking about it, and that he was also on the streets that night when Allan was taken from the jail. When members of the mob were later asked why they took part in this horrific act, many said that Allan had gotten away once before and that he had been protected by his rich white friends. They said that Allan took advantage of another poor white girl, and had the mob not intervened, his rich white friends would have gotten him out of jail once again. They said,
You know what the mayor sound like? The mayor sound like Trump when he using those dog whistles to talk to the poor whites. You feel me? Like that's what the mayor sound like. The mayor sound like how Trump be using the poor whites to do his agenda and get them to follow him and stuff like that. That's what it sounded like to me right now.
that the law could not be trusted and that it was their duty to put Allan down once and for all. Almost no one in town believed that Allan had attacked Mrs. Ramey. It was clear that it was a frame-up job to get rid of Allan Green. But Jim Crow still ruled the day during this time, and getting an all-white jury to convict white men of taking the life of a hated black man was going to be hard. The trial was originally scheduled to begin in July of 1930, but it was postponed twice. One of those times it was postponed was because attorneys for the mob members said that it would be too hot in July to hold a trial. The atmosphere leading up to the trial was extremely tense all around town. It was so bad that the governor had to send in 12 constables to go to the trial just to help keep the peace. And days before the trial, Solicitor Leon Harris received death threats. But he was not deterred and moved full steam ahead with the prosecution. Finally, on November 3rd, 1930, the trial started. Solicitor Harris prosecuted the case for the state. The mayor and the other defendants got the best representation that one could find during that time. They were represented by an attorney and a former judge named Mendel L. Smith. He was an extremely prominent criminal defense attorney in South Carolina. Over 100 witnesses were put on the list to testify at the trial. At the trial, Sheriff Thomas and his son both identified 2 of the mob members, but this was not enough. Most of the mob members who gave sworn statements claimed that their statements were taken under duress and under threat of violence, and the judge did not do the prosecution any favors at all. He excluded several of the sworn statements, including the statement of one of the mob members who admitted that he was the one that drove the truck to the jail and from the jail with Allan in it to the site of the lynching. And the mayor pulled a surprise at trial that no one was expecting. All of a sudden at trial, the mayor had an alibi. A man named J.E. Reardon, he came forward and he testified for the mayor on his behalf. He said that Mayor Ballantyne came to his home that night 2 hours before Allan was lynched. He said that Ballantyne came to his house to cancel a fishing trip that the two had planned, and the two of them ended up talking for hours and for a long time after that. He said that the mayor was at his home at the time that the mob stormed the jail and took Allan and lynched him. There was absolutely no remorse from the mob or those that wanted Allan dead at the trial. When one person testified that Allan deserved what he got, members in the courtroom actually cheered and clapped. This led the judge to actually ban clapping in the courtroom. After all the evidence was heard, the judge entered not guilty verdicts for 7 of the defendants without letting those go to the jury to decide. On November 7th, 1930, the jury started their deliberations at 11:40 a.m. Exactly 2 hours later, at 1:40 p.m., the jury came back and found the remaining defendants not guilty of all charges. And just like that, there will be no justice for what happened to Allan or the sheriff. But that's not where this story ends. Around the same time as the trial, Corey Green, Allan's wife, filed a lawsuit against Oconee County under South Carolina's anti-lynching statute to seek money damages for Allan's death. South Carolina was one of the few states that had passed anti-lynching laws aimed at discouraging these barbaric acts of racial violence. The statute was passed in 1896 and is actually still current law to this day. The statute imposes liability on the county where a lynching occurred for failing to prevent the act and said that the victim's family was entitled to at least $2,000 from the county where the lynching occurred. The problem was that the anti-lynching statute was rarely enforced in South Carolina. A 1930 study found that only 6 counties had ever paid fines to victims' families. And to avoid pain, most counties failed to report lynchings or they called them something else. But this did not stop people like Corey Green from trying to get some bit of justice for what happened to their loved one. Oconee County defended the lawsuit and it went to a hearing. Sheriff John Thomas testified for Corey Green and said that Allan was innocent of the crime that he was accused of and he was lynched. The judge ordered that the county was to pay Corey Green $2,000. Oconee County refused to approve an appropriation to pay Corey Green the $2,000 that she was owed. One of them even introduced a bill to repeal the law that made the county liable for lynching cases. Corey Green had no choice but to take her case all the way to the South Carolina Supreme Court, which said that the county had to pay her the $2,000 under South Carolina's anti-lynching statute. But there's still one more part to this story. In October 1932, one of the mob members that was indicted and found not guilty came forward to tell the truth. Lottie Harris was a mill worker and he went to Sheriff Thomas with his pastor and said that he had a guilty conscience and wanted to make an honest confession. Lottie told the sheriff that he was part of the mob that stormed the jail and lynched Allan Green that day. He also returned the weapon that he personally took from the sheriff. Despite the fact that he confessed, Lottie Harris was never held accountable. There was nothing that the state could do. He had been found not guilty and could not be tried again. Allan's only crime was being black and successful. Jim Crow came for him twice, once in 1915 and again in 1930.
Hold on, man. So even when one of them came to confess, nothing still happened. He even gave back the weapon that he took from the sheriff that they knocked over, cracked his whole skull and everything. That's crazy. All 17 got acquitted, and they said the whole town knew what was about to happen. And I ain't gonna lie. That white man must have felt invincible in the Jim Crow South. That's probably why they going crazy now, because they probably feel like they losing all their power. That's why they trying to get it back. Because I'm pretty sure they felt invincible. That's why Trump talking about make America great again. They trying to get back to that. A time where they was running everything, had all the power. I mean, they still do, but it ain't like they ain't got like Jim Crow South. White folks like had it. That's crazy. Wow.
The last time, Jim Crow got what it wanted. Everything that Allan worked for was wiped away as if it never existed. His life, his wealth, his marriage, all gone because he was black. All of the well-intentioned white people who advocated and stood up for Allan could not save Allan from the vicious mob that was determined to get him at all costs. After this horrific incident, everyone moved on with their lives. Mayor Robert Ballantyne, he went on to have a successful legal career. He was appointed counsel for the Atlanta office of the Securities and Exchange Commission. All that is left of Allan Green are old news articles and his death certificate. This death certificate that you see right here is the only thing that confirms that Allan Green ever existed. That's why it's so important that we tell Allan's story, so that his life and what happened to him won't be lost to the halls of injustice. He mattered, and what happened to Allan Green matters. I want to know your thoughts on this story. Had you ever heard of Allan Green, and how did it make you feel learning all that he went through? Leave me a comment down below.
Man, we're going to end the video right there. Thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. And have you ever heard of the Allan Green story? You feel me? I live in Sumter, South Carolina, and I think I heard a little bit about this, but I probably wasn't paying attention like that, but you know what? I ain't never heard this Allan Green story. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. I never heard this story. This is crazy, man. They that's crazy. But this also goes to show you, right? Like you know how some black people say today, I'm successful. Hey, there is no racism. If there was racism, we cannot be so, how can we be so successful? We got Oprah, we got this, we got Oprah over here, we got Michael Jordan, we got all these successful black people. There is no racism. But this goes to show you that just because you're a successful black person, that don't mean there's no racism. We done Mr. Julian Johnson done talked about two successful black men. Two successful black men that gained riches. You feel me? Wealth. And they just took it, they just killed them and took it away. Like this is crazy. So yes, you can be a successful black person in this, and there still can be racism. There two can be like what's the saying? Two things could be true. You feel me? So I always want to get that point out because I always hear it. I always see nowadays, especially nowadays, I see black people saying there is no racism because I'm successful. If there's racism, I wouldn't be successful. It's not true. It's not true at all. You feel me? So I appreciate everybody tuned in. Leave in the comments, cause my voice starting to go out. Leave in the comments. If you ever heard of Allan Green, you feel me? Happy Black History Month. Stay black, and I'll see y'all later. Peace out. Yeah, my voice is gone for real. Oh man.